This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman. And you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
In brightest day, in blackest night, no evil shall escape his sight. Green Lantern, the animated series. Go green.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 174 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal, and with me my good friend, good brother, and the gentleman that runs our Twitter account. That's right, it's Liam. Liam, welcome to the new month of September here in 2021 and our first official Elseworlds month of this year. We mentioned last week that we typically do one of these a year, and we pushed it back a little bit later this year, but I am excited to kick this off. So welcome to episode 174 of the DCAU Review.
That is right, and as you mentioned, this is a special Elseworlds month. We are outside of the main DCAU continuity for the next 4 weeks, and this time, rather than going with a specific character theme, you know, we've previously done Elseworlds months devoted to both Batman and Superman. We decided we would take a look on the other side of the coin and take a look at some villains throughout the month. But rather than just stick with one singular villain, we thought we could jump around to some different shows we've talked about a little bit before. We have some things we have never talked about before. Definitely a lot of fun stuff coming up in this Elseworlds Villains Month, and we're kicking it off with something that's a little bit familiar.
That's right. We reviewed this, I think maybe just a little less than a year ago when we did a Green Lantern themed month here at the DCAU Review. We reviewed the very popular series from the early, what do you call that? It's not the aughts, but the mid-aughts, the early...
The 2010s?
The 2010s, there we go. And that is the Green Lantern, the animated series, a short-lived and often overlooked, maybe underappreciated, depending on who you ask. I think the people that really love the Green Lantern, the animated series, will tell you that it is certainly something that does not get its proper due. So we are returning here. If you recall in the archives, you can check it out. We did the pilot episode a few months back, so you can check that out in the archives or on your favorite podcast app. But this month, kicking things off, we're going to jump forward a little bit into the series and moving up to what is, at least on the streaming apps, is the 9th episode, I believe, in the production or in the run, and that is In Love and War is the name of the episode. And this episode features heavily the Star Sapphires, Liam. So we, of course, DCAU fans will know and recognize Star Sapphire was introduced once we got into the Justice League. She played a fairly large role in the Injustice gang, if you will, and some later appearances even in Justice League Unlimited. So she had quite the role, and she's a classic foe of the Green Lantern. I think the popularity of the character kind of took off right around the time that this episode debuted because of the Green Lantern War and everything that happened with In Blackest Night, and certainly Jeff Johns' writing in main DC continuity, and then of course the horribly failed movie attempt at launching the Green Lantern, which was also a Jeff Johns project, was setting up one Carol Ferris also potentially to be the Star Sapphire as well. But we get a look at that in this episode today, which originally debuted on the Cartoon Network back on April the 28th, 2012, meaning we just passed the 9-year anniversary of this episode debuting. And before we get into our review for this week, I'm sure you have the Internet Movie Database official synopsis ready to go.
That's right, and this is the synopsis for In Love and War, which was written by Andrew Robinson and directed by Sam Liu, with music by Friedrich Wiseman, and I could not find an animation studio, so that one will remain a mystery. And that synopsis reads as such. Carol Ferris encounters an alien jewel and becomes the Star Sapphire, a powerful but unstable violet lantern. She learns Hal Jordan's identity and fights him for his deceiving her. All right, that's an F.
It's not even not even really what happens. She doesn't
No, that's why it's an F.
That's not at all what happens.
It's also very wordy and poor sentence structure, but it's also just not what happened. This is a failing grade for that one.
This is if this was an assignment, you would go to the student and you'd say, I know that you did not read this. Like, I know the book report that you just did, you either tried to read you literally looked at the cover of the book and decided what it was about. Like, no, this is incorrect. Please see me after class.
Yeah, but as we jump into the overarching plot here,
the actual plot of the episode.
Yes, the synopsis is right that this episode does focus on the Star Sapphires, as you mentioned, Cal, and that it does feature Carol Ferris. But that's a pretty, it's not a minor detail, but that's hardly the story of the episode, which is of course centered around the main crew of the Green Lantern, the animated series. They are on their spaceship. It's Hal Jordan and Kilowog, along with the Red Lantern Razor, who we had previously met in the pilot episodes, who had sort of defected from the Red Lanterns to sort of join with Hal and Kilowog in their quest, along with their AI robot Aya, who's also, I think, the ship's AI. It's kind of like the ship's AI on Legends of Tomorrow, I guess.
Yes.
Same kind of thing, where it starts out as just a disembodied voice, and then eventually has a body and goes on the adventures with them. But Kilowog's down in the dumps. He's recently sort of had to end a relationship, and wouldn't you know it, they are interrupted by a space ghost. Not that one.
Not the one not at the desk running the talk show. And
it was not Coast to Coast, unfortunately.
Hanna-Barbera's famous space ghost. Okay, different one. Got it.
No, it was a translucent slug monster of some kind. One of those is floating out in space and attaches itself to their ship. They try to fight it off, but are pretty quickly taken and tied up by the monster's tentacles, and things look pretty dire for our heroes when the two Star Sapphires, as we have been talking about, appear and are able to sort of fend off the monster, and then invite Hal and Kilowog and the rest of the crew to their home planet to rest and sort of recuperate. And
how many lantern colors are there?
So you're what, pink lanterns?
Not precisely, Green Lantern. Where you value willpower, the Star Sapphires channel the power and serve the cause of love.
Thanks for the assist. How do you happen to be in this neck of the woods?
This sector of space is ours, but pardon my manners. I am Agapo. This is my niece, Gieta.
You're mighty handy with those power rings. We sure could use your help fighting the Red Lantern Corps.
I would enjoy allying myself with you, Hal Jordan.
We are close to our home planet. Perhaps you'd accompany us for rest and repair before you resume your mission?
I don't mind if I do.
Kind of right away, you start getting the feeling that something's a little bit up. And I'll just say this, Gal. I have seen probably less than 5 episodes of Star Trek in my life.
Mm-hmm.
But this really felt like an episode of Star Trek to me. Like,
yeah,
it's like they go to the strange new planet, and there's all, and there's attractive women for our Captain Kirk to make out with. Yep. And then things are not as they seem, and then one of the other characters gets captured, and then the troops, the crew has to rally to save and kind of get out of Dodge at the end. So this has that kind of vibe as we go along. But yeah, we sort of we go to the planet, and they're sort of paired off, and Kilowog is still quite despondent, and we find, I guess we start to see what the Star Sapphires can do. Not only do they have power rings like the other Lantern Corps, but they have these ability to not only see inside people's minds to find their true loves, but also create portals to bring their true loves to them on this planet, all in service of this darker plan that we'll sort of figure out as the rest of the episode unrolls.
Yeah, so we have this initial interaction, and as you mentioned, Kilowog is sort of the sad sack of the episode as he sort of missing his beloved Galea, who is his love interest that he had to leave on his home planet. And so we see that through her interaction with her, this queen, Agapo, who's the queen of the Star Sapphires, is revealed to her that his true love is off on this planet awaiting him. So through this and through the detection of this need for love, it appears that she's able to generate a Star Sapphire ring, which appears to Kilowog's love, and Galea eventually shows up later on the planet when Kilowog and Hal and Razor, well, actually not Razor, but Aya decide to leave the ship and sort of do this exploration as the Star Sapphires are going to throw them this banquet and as a thank you. Although I feel like they throwing them a banquet is the first clue that, like, wait a minute, didn't the Star Sapphires save the Green Lanterns? Why are they throwing them a banquet? That makes little to no sense here. I can't believe they didn't smell a trap right away, but I guess maybe the power of love was what clouded their judgment at this point. But they do their best to divide and conquer at this point, as Kilowog is sort of lagging behind and happens to see off to the side someone that looks a lot like his love Galea, and he follows her and has a brief interaction with her where she promises that she now has the power to make their love last forever. She is fully transformed into a Star Sapphire wearing the full Star Sapphire uniform, and we cut as she's about to reveal to Kilowog just what this power to protect their love is.
Galea? Is it really you?
Hello, my love.
What are you doing here? And in one of them Star Sapphire outfits.
Don't you like it?
Baby, you look good in a Gorlian sand sack. But I don't understand. How is this possible? How did you...
Hush. I have something to show you. Something to keep our love alive and thriving forever.
And then we cut back to in the interaction, the Queen has introduced Hal to his her niece, rather, Gietta, who is going to be Hal's love interest, or someone who is very interested in Hal at this. She is immediately very flirtatious with Hal and begins to isolate him, and they go off on their own just before the banquet, and is immediately extremely flirtatious with him as well. And back on the ship, Razor, who is the Red Lantern that we met in the first episode, that has sort of defected from the Red Lantern Corps and has aligned himself, at least in part, with Kilowog and Hal, is refused to leave the ship, and he is immediately suspect once Aya lets them know that she can't detect Kilowog anymore and she's having trouble reaching him. So he begins to suspect there might be some foul play. And that's when we kind of cut back to the Queen, who is having an interaction with her niece and explaining that things are moving far too slowly for her, and that she needs to speed things up. And at some point we get a cut just outside of where Hal and this niece are spending time together. We see that Kilowog has been encased in a Star Sapphire type shell, and that he is trapped, and that explaining exactly why I can't quite make contact with him. So this sort of reveals a little bit of what the plot is that they seem to need to trap the men because there are no other men, as mentioned by Hal, specifically on the planet. They are trapping the men there, and this is all part of a big plan to seduce Hal in order to sort of draw this power of love. But in order to do that, they need him to fall in love. And we discover through this interaction with Gietta that Hal has a love already, and that's going to prevent her from being able to seduce him.
Yeah, it's an interesting sequence. We kind of are given those clues that that Gietta isn't quite as into the whole plan as the queen is, as the rest of the Star Sapphires seem to be. She's not quite so married to the cause, as it were, and there's even a mention where the queen tells her, you're not the one that's supposed to be falling in love, he is. So it's kind of this really dramatic thing where she's where it's clear that she's like the double agent. She's the Bond girl, to mix my metaphors, who's working for the bad guy. And so yes, once she makes that realization that she won't be able to quite to put Hal in that state of love to where they can encase him in these strange Star Sapphire chambers that they're encasing all of these other men in, she in fact does make contact to Carol Ferris, and we get a little bit of a flashback. There was a little previously on at the beginning of the episode, but we get a little bit of a flashback again of where Hal sort of left her in the first episode and disappeared and has not come back to Earth since the pilot episode. And so she's on the phone trying to find him. It's treating it like a missing persons case, and then this strange glowing light appears to her and brings her through this portal to this homeworld of the Star Sapphires, and she sees Hal, and immediately it's kind of this really sweet, nice reunion. And as he begins to sort of explain what's been happening, and as she sort of also deals with the revelation that he is in fact the Green Lantern, she notices Gietta is there, and sort of seems to then believe that Hal has in fact been doing some extracurricular activities in his time away.
Green Lantern?
Carol.
The ring said it'd take me to my love, but it's you. You're Hal. Oh, Hal. I can't believe I was ever fooled by this stupid mask.
Carol, I don't understand. How can you be here? I
thought you were dead. Oh, Hal, I thought I'd never see you again. I see I've interrupted something.
No, Carol,
All this time, I thought you were dead. Well, now you're gonna wish you were dead.
From her, and that maybe he hasn't been exactly faithful to her, and that leads to her. It's really one of like kind of the big action beats of the episode is that she first attacks Gietta and then sort of attacks Hal, and that's sort of counterbalanced by Razor and continuing to try to hunt for Kilowog.
Yeah, it's that scene is pretty funny in and of itself. There's some quick, witty banter between Carol and Hal, and as you said, Hal at this point it looks very bad, even though he's been pretty resistant to Gietta's advances, and it certainly doesn't look good. But he and Carol, after a quick battle, she quickly blasts Gietta, and then Hal and Carol have their own sort of battle. He does his best, and apparently I think that Gietta, it reminds her that there's an initial, once they accept the ring, there's sort of this initial loss of memory or loss of control, sort of explaining away her initial passion and loss of understanding or willing to trust Hal. So Hal sort of breaks through that by putting down his weapon and allowing her to put, he literally takes her fist and puts it on his chest and says, if you don't believe me, go ahead and do what you have to do.
You've got it all wrong, baby. She's just a friend.
Don't worry, sister. I won't forget your part in this.
You're suffering delirium from the transformation. We Star Sapphires are beings of love.
Carol, stop. I don't know how you got here or into that outfit, which you look great in, by the way, but...
Oh, I do. Because your little tramp here is in the same outfit.
You've got to shake this off. Whatever they've done to you...
What they did is give me power. You let me think you were dead. And all the while, it was just party time for old Hal, wasn't it?
First of all, nothing happened between me and Gieta. And second, this is nuts. Let's just talk.
You want to talk? Talk to the hand. Let me go!
I won't. Letting go of you the first time was the hardest thing I've ever done.
You're lying. Again?
Carol. If that's what you think.
And this sort of snaps her out of this daze, and they embrace and share a kiss. And at this point, we realize that the subplot of Razor and Aya sort of looking for where Kilowog has disappeared to. Aya has gone off on her own, and as the Queen has said that she's not welcome on their planet. She's only tolerated there because she has no emotion as a robot. This also acts as a plan for the Queen to attempt to isolate Razor in an attempt to do to him what was done to Kilowog and what they were attempting to do to Hal as well. We quickly realize, though, that Razor has no love in his heart because he is a Red Lantern. He is full of hatred, and she is sort of unable to seduce him. Aya also discovers where Kilowog just happens to be, and there's this ensuing fight that happens between some of the Star Sapphires, and then Aya and Razor. There's a quick battle that happens, and that brings Hal and after he has freed Kilowog, he too discovers where Kilowog is and manages to free him. And this kind of brings them into this palace, and they have a brief interaction. Before that, though, there's an interaction where Gieta sort of pleads with Carol to finish the process, and that she lets her know that she's able to sort of do to Hal what was done to Kilowog, and that this can preserve him and keep him there and their love alive forever. And there's a brief interaction where Carol and Gieta, where Carol explains to her that that's not what love is. Holding somebody against their will is not love, and that love looks very differently. So there's this sort of aha moment for Gieta, who, as you mentioned, was already on the fence about this mission and how the Star Sapphires were doing things. This leads to another battle, and then we kind of have our final scene where that wily space ghost makes another appearance.
Yeah, that's like it's Chekhov's giant translucent tentacle monster or something like that. Yeah, introduced at the start, and then makes a reappearance at the end there as sort of like the pet of the Star Sapphires. And once again, it looks like they're sort of at their wits' end, and then Gieta actually stands up to the Queen and to the rest of the Star Sapphires and takes care of the monster and allows the Green Lanterns to escape. Kilowog not so willingly, as he unfortunately had to leave Giela behind. But it's sort of a dramatic ending there as they're sort of left there as the Queen tells Gieta that she has much to learn, and she says, no, actually I think I have much to teach, and that kind of goes back to what you were saying when what Carol tells her about what love really is and what it means to sort of what it would mean to actually be a lantern corps that professes to teach that emotion and sort of the power of that emotion. So it's a fun little episode. There's one other nugget I will mention is that when they go into Razor's mind, they do see that he once did have a great love who is deceased, and we find out that Aya basically based her entire look off of this woman.
Men spread war. The Star Sapphires bring the gift of love. The galaxy will know peace only when all men have been gentled by love's violet light. So you did have a true love. One who died, but whose form lives again in this robot.
It's true. You were in my mind. You stole the image of Ilana from my memories.
I meant no harm. I simply based my mechanical form on the last imprint I had in my database.
Enough talk. This Red Lantern is dead inside. He has nothing to fuel us. It is a mercy to destroy him.
And that sort of seems to be setting up a little bit of a betrayal, because it seems like they have gotten a little closer and are maybe not in a relationship, but are headed in that direction. And then Razor sort of feels betrayed by that knowledge, that she feel, and maybe a little violated that she took this memory from him and used it to sort of make her face and everything. So there's definitely some elements that will continue on in the rest of the season, I'm sure. But yeah, this is with, despite having a lot of connections to other episodes either earlier on or sort of this larger Red Lantern war that's looming that they talk about several times. It's ended up being a pretty nice sort of self-contained episode that kind of like I said, kind of feels like a classic 70s sci-fi show or something where they just visit this strange planet and they go on an adventure, and then they have to fight their way out, and then they're on their way to the next adventure at the end. So there's kind of a nice little bow put on it, even as these sort of larger story threads begin to form.
Yeah, I think, and we can start getting into our scores here for the episode. I do like that. I do like that. Despite we've skipped over 4, 5, 6 episodes or so from the ones that we had previously reviewed, maybe a little more, 8 episodes, I guess, or 7 episodes. It didn't feel like we were too lost. It felt like we could pick things up and sort of understand what was happening. There was enough background and understanding once you remember who your main players are. Obviously Kilowog and Hal Jordan are pretty standard, remembering that Razor was this Red Lantern character and that Aya is the sort of as you said, the mind behind their ship, the Interceptor, and Carol being his girlfriend. That's all pretty standard Green Lantern lore. So allowing you to be introduced to these new Star Sapphire characters and having a self-contained episode that as you said is a great homage to those original a 60s Star Trek or even any of those other serialized shows from the 60s that this would fit into. I think works well, and I think that while the plot itself is somewhat, as you said, it could be derivative in some ways, that it's done well enough, and it lays the groundwork, and also, as you said, sets up threads to follow throughout the rest of this show, for not only your main characters of Hal and Kilowog as they deal with their own relationships. And then you obviously have Carol's story and her learning Hal's secret and having to return back to Earth. And then you have the Star Sapphires, who do end up making at least one more appearance, if not several more appearances. So you have some groundwork laid for them as well. It's really good writing, I think. I think it's a solid episode, and there's a good 22-minute set of fun. There's not a whole lot of action. A lot of it is dialogue. I feel like you have the scene with the monster at the beginning that they have to come in contact with, and then there's a fairly large lull in activity until you get to the scene with Carol and Green Lantern sort of having their battle there, and then there's another mini battle between Razor, Aya, and the Star Sapphires that sort of is happening simultaneously with that, and then again the sort of mini battle at the end. It's not action heavy. There's a lot of dialogue, a lot of intrigue, and a lot of sort of what's trying to figure out what's happening with these Star Sapphires. Are they friend or foe? So it's not action heavy, and I feel like it could have lent a little bit more to that, which maybe would have made it a little bit of a higher score for me. But with that said, I went with a pretty solid 6 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I went just a touch higher at 7 out of 10. I had a lot of fun with this. Like you said, it can be tough to come in pretty cold, and this is a series we've talked about that neither of us had really much of a nostalgia for. Had maybe each seen maybe one episode. if that, when we reviewed the first one. So it is interesting coming to this series that is beloved, as we talked about, and sort of seeing it with fresh eyes, and in this case, jumping ahead quite a few episodes from where we were last. So I do think that could have theoretically been a recipe for us feeling a little bit lost or a little bit uninterested in the plot at hand. But I think they did a good job of making it clear, even if this was the first episode of the series you saw, I think you could kind of grasp everything that's happening and why the characters are doing what they're doing, why they're feeling what they're feeling, and everything. And I think you still get kind of an emotional charge out of seeing that Hal and Carol reunion in the middle of the episode. And even if you don't necessarily have watched the most of the other episodes of the series. So yeah, overall, a pretty solid, fun time. Like I said, there are threads that I'm sure maybe would have meant more to us if we had watched every single episode. But even without that, I thought it was a pretty fun time just as a standalone episode.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think that I think we forgot to mention one of the other minor and threads that they sort of it's not a throwaway, and I wonder what the follow-up, if there is follow-up that happens with it. But there is I remember, at least in the pilot, there was this natural distrust, and there's always this sort of underlying theme with the Green Lanterns of the distrust of the Guardians of the of the Galaxy, not those Guardians of the Galaxy, but the other Guardians of the Galaxy, the Guardians of the Green Lantern Corps. And they mentioned that this race of Star Sapphires was originally involved with the Guardians, and that they went their separate ways because the Guardians refused to allow emotion of any kind to influence their decisions. So there's always that underlying tension between the members of the Green Lantern Corps and the Guardians, because the Guardians tend not to have or to rely on emotion. And then you have obviously Hal Jordan, a very emotional human being that tends to be the ring bearer. Even in the case of Kyle Rayner or John Stewart, you have very emotional human beings that are wielding this ring. So interesting to see if in the future, when we cover more of these, or down the line, if that's a thread that gets picked up also, because I always feel like that's a pretty fascinating storyline that is woven into the typical Green Lantern tales. All right, Liam, let's move on to visual and animation for this week. As you said, no credited animation studio for this, but as we've talked about when we reviewed this initially back last year, it's harder to sort of gauge this one and give this one a proper score based on the fact that it's a completely different medium than what we're used to as far as using CGI and computer animation, completely computer animated, as opposed to the hand-drawn or digital drawings that we typically see in the DCAU. With that said, we know that this is a heavily influenced Bruce Timm designed series. We have he is the executive producer credited for this entire series. So lots of barrel-chested big men with square jaws and square fists at times have been translated into a three-dimensional world here. But for the actual episode itself, as we mentioned, there's not a lot of action to rely on. However, I think the action scenes those action sequences do tend to stick out pretty well. And then there's a few other scenes that maybe aren't heavily action heavy, but do, I think, leave a lasting impression. What stuck out for you as far as the visuals for this week?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you just look at the designs of the different Star Sapphires we see. The Queen's uniform is quite a bit different than Gyata's, or the sort of the guards women that we see sort of surrounding the Queen for the rest of the episode, or Giala, or even Carol. Carol's Star Sapphire suit is pretty reminiscent of her like 2009, 2010 comic book look. It's a little less revealing than the comic book version was, but yeah, it's pretty spot on to that. There's a little bit of a touch of like the classic Silver Age Star Sapphire suit in it as well.
Yeah, she's got the big collar, which is
Mhm.
kind of Silver Age. She doesn't have. I think she had more of a domino mask type look in that Silver
Yes.
Age. So they did go with a more modern, just sort of almost like a border around the outer edge of her eyes that kind of extends out past her face. And as you mentioned, yeah, certainly a little less revealing, but still the classic thigh high boots and. That she even comments on as she's in the costume, and there's some subtle sort of meta commentary about it too, which I thought was pretty amusing that she makes about the costume and making the costume look good, which I thought was pretty funny. But yeah, it's faithful, I feel like, to the source material without being overly sexualized, which is, obviously a huge complaint and certainly a justifiable one for that more recent Star Sapphire look. So I think it's the best of both worlds. I think it does well. It doesn't feel like my issue with that original Star Sapphire Silver Age design is that it does look quite outdated. If it's sort of like looking at the Nightwing costume, the disco era Nightwing costume.
Yeah.
Power. It's like, yeah, you can appreciate it, but it clearly looks like a product of the time that it was drawn in. So I think marrying both of the newer, more modern design with that classic design gives it that familiar feel, but also allows it to not be completely ridiculous and disrespectful and overly sexualized.
Yeah, agreed. And as far as the action moments go, like I said, we don't get a lot. There's that opening bit with the monster, and then there's one thing, and I think we talked about this last time. It's still strange to me, I guess, because every other animated show that does Green Lantern puts the green outline around them when they fly, and this show does not. Carol had like the violet outline around her when she was using her ring and flying and whatever, but for whatever reason the Green Lanterns don't, and so like I find that mildly distracting. But that's obviously a stylistic choice, which again, maybe if I'd watched the other 8 episodes in between and didn't watch these 2 that we have watched a year apart, maybe it wouldn't seem so weird to me. But that is something that stood out to me again.
Yep.
And then we get a little bit more of we get a little bit of constructs this week. We see Hal make a buzzsaw with his ring to saw off one of the spears of the Star Sapphires, which I'm always a fan of seeing that show up. And I think I liked the sequence where I apologize to people that are fans of the show. I'm still not sure if it's Aya or Aya.
I think I feel like they say Aya because I think it's like it's like AI but backwards. But yeah, it's spelled like Aya. So I think it's Aya though.
Okay, we'll go with Aya. And apologies if we're wrong, but yeah, I like that sequence where she's sort of floating around looking, and you sort of see all of the gems, and she finds Kilowog and then sort of looks around, and you just see the silhouettes of all of these other creatures that have been encased in these shells. And then right as she's about to free Kilowog, the Star Sapphire guards show up, and then she sort of does the Wonder Woman pose and crosses the shields on her hands and goes into battle. I think that's a pretty fun sequence there, and then leading into that the sort of, like we said, brief final battle we get before they fly away. And even that last little bit there where Kilowog is sort of defending himself against the Star Sapphires, but then sees his lost love among the ranks and sort of wants to stop and go to her, and Hal has to sort of forcibly pull him into the ship, and so they get away is pretty dramatic from a visual standpoint. So yeah, I think there's some fun stuff, like you said, not a heavy action episode. So but I thought what they did was pretty good, and I think the sort of the romance and the reunion of Hal and Carol is very nice from both a plot standpoint, and you feel that emotion when when they do embrace, and when it does feel like these two people that really care for each other. And my one other note I just want to note is that apparently the Star Sapphire ring also can give you hair extensions.
Yeah, Carol's hair magically grows. It does.
Yeah, she kind of has like the season 2 Friends Rachel cut in her business power suit, and then all of a sudden she has like this long flowing hair when she's in the Star Sapphire suit. But when she takes the ring off, she's back to back to all business with the shortened hair. So I just thought that was funny. But overall, I think there's some fun moments. Maybe nothing that blew my mind, but still a fun episode visually. So I went with another 7 out of 10 for my visual score.
Well, there you go. And I actually gave it the same exact score. I also gave it a 7 out of 10. The things that stuck out for me, I would say a lot of the, for lack of a better descriptor, set pieces, I guess, when they're actually when they're on Zamaron, which is the planet where the Star Sapphires are live or call home. There are several scenes where, as Gietta is attempting to seduce Hal, she's outside this large platform just outside the palace, sort of overlooking this beautiful waterfall and this beautiful scenery, and she comments on how beautiful it is. And the art design team really did their best to make it look like a very strong paradise, a place where you would want to be. It reminds me of Greek mythology with the sirens that would do, or even Medusa, mm-hmm. who would seduce these characters, and everything on the surface would look very attractive, and everything would look very, would want to keep them there. Why would you ever want to leave these places? And then there's this underbelly of terror, as they sort of pan out further, and you see Kilowog and several others, as you mentioned, this field of gems, of frozen men inside of these gems. So I do like that there's, on the surface, is this beautiful paradise, and bubbling underneath the surface is sort of this nasty undercurrent of ugliness underneath of it. So I thought that was great. I think the scene also where Carol is first contacted by the Star Sapphires and the ring appears, she's in this office at I guess at the airfield where they work, and she's mm-hmm. on the phone with someone who's telling her to sort of give up hope. And just as she hangs up the phone, specifically saying to give up hope on looking for Hal.
Miss Ferris, we've done everything possible. We've turned over every rock, followed every lead. There's no trace of Hal Jordan.
What are you saying?
At this point, we'd advise you to terminate your search and move on. Very sorry.
Thank you for your efforts.
Carol Ferris of Earth, you have lost your true love. The Star Sapphires offer to make your heart whole again, to reunite you, to make you one of our own.
As she hangs up the phone, it's sort of somewhat dark in the room, and then all of a sudden it's illuminated by this pink glow, and we cut away as the ring itself begins to explain to her just what the ring is supposed to do and what the Star Sapphires stand for. And then we cut back just as she's about to accept the ring, and the pink hue glows not only in the entire room, but shows off of her. And it's visually just a very interesting scene in lighting wise and color wise. The color palette, that it's almost completely shaded in pink, which I think was great and sort of perfect for the scene, something you would definitely see in a comic book panel. So appreciated that. And then I think the main standout as far as visuals within the action beats comes from when you have Razor and Aya sort of battling these Star Sapphire rank and file, and then it cuts back to Carol and Green Lantern doing battle, and there's sort of he uses a few constructs, including a hand, and there's sort of a 360 pan that moves around, and that's one of the benefits that we can that we talk about when the difference between using sort of hand-drawn animation and sort of infusing CGI into hand drawn animation, and then this obviously is completely CGI, you have the ability to do some of these fantastic 360 camera pans that move around your characters in a dynamic way that would have been near impossible or incredibly difficult to pull off, or incredibly expensive and counterintuitive to a budget in sort of hand-drawn animation. So there is some benefit to that, as we have some of this battle and flight between Carol and Hal, and this cut back and forth between Aya and Razors. They sort of do the Avengers pose, where they sort of pose back to back and the camera pans around them as they're ready to do battle with these Star Sapphire warriors. So I thought those visuals were the most interesting and notable, and I did like the design of the Space Ghost, I guess is what we're calling him. I thought he was interesting. He sort of has, as you mentioned, a squid-like or octopus-like look with maybe a hair of a symbiote or something in his facial region, kind of no eyes with these big sharp teeth, and an interesting design, and the fact that he was again translucent yet able to sort of be a full construct that was attacking the members of the Interceptor. I really enjoyed that. So some good things that stood out, despite it not being maybe an action heavy episode. There were, I think, a lot of things that visually that were treats for the eyes, if you will.
100%.
All right, let's move on, Liam, to our music for this week's episode. And before we went on the air, you mentioned that was something that really stood out for you for this episode. I would agree. As we mentioned when we initially reviewed this again back last year, the Green Lantern theme song, man, hugely underrated. Just a great theme. It's a very quick 30-second, I think, theme song that they composed just for this for the run on Cartoon Network, and it's just easily memorable and hummable, and it's a great theme. It fits right in with the heroic theme. Maybe not a 1-to-1, I probably would give the edge to the DCAU Green Lantern theme song as far as my favorite Green Lantern theme, but this is a pretty close 1-to-1A. This is easily hummable and something that's probably going to get stuck in your head if you watch too many of these episodes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great way to start the episode. Again, feels very epic and spacey and worthy of this grand sort of sci-fi superhero. And it fits perfectly. It's a really great way to start every episode of this show. And I thought the music throughout the episode, again, maybe not a songs that you can, a lot of music that you think about in the way that we might think about something from Batman the Animated Series, but I thought especially when Aya is going around and looking in all of these men encased in these gems, like, I think that it's just really ominous and really adding to that sense of dread sort of all throughout that scene. And then as she's confronted by the Star Sapphires and she sort of squares up and is ready to attack, the music sort of becomes more traditional action music. And then I thought the music when Hal and Carol are having their sort of heart to heart, and she's sort of asking him why he left and where he's been, and he sort of is slowly explaining to her why he had to go and how much he misses her and how he wants to come back, but there's this sort of impending invasion from the Red Lanterns, and it actually brings in the main Green Lantern theme a little bit as he's sort of explaining his mission, just sort of in a much more sort of somber and more dramatic way. But I thought some of the quieter moments had great music as well as the action, which is always nice to see.
Yeah, there's a lot in this. It's a very cinematic theme too. I feel like the moments where Carol is on the phone again with this person telling her that she needs to give up hope are punctuated with this sad somber tone, and then the scenes with Hal and Gietta by as she's attempting to seduce him are punctuated with this sort of sweet yet somewhat sinister undertone. As you can tell, at least initially it's kind of innocent, and then once the subplot of the queen is revealed, it's a little bit more sinister and played upon. And then you have the theme as Aya is sort of flying around attempting to locate where Kilowog is, which is a little bit more urgent and frantic. And then certainly the small action beats that we do get are punctuated with a little bit more of a gusto and action there. And ultimately that final scene sort of punctuated also as we see Kilowog realize that he has to leave his love behind again, is a little bit sadder, so there are moments that are perfectly sort of punctuated here throughout, and the decisions, no surprise by, based on the legends that are, doing the music for this. But, it's great that, the scenes are treated with as if this was a movie, or as if this was, this was not just your run of the mill children's cartoon. So they add a lot to the emotion of each scene here, ironically, in an episode that's really about love and emotion. Always, I mean, Green Lantern, it's always about emotion, but this episode particularly, about love and emotion. So there's a firm balance between the sinister tone and then some of the lighter moments and some of the softer strings. And
yeah, agreed. And just one more shout out to Friedrich Weidman, who composed for this episode. But yeah, just I thought it's one of those things where the music in every scene adds to whatever is happening. If it is an action beat, it's very big and epic, like you said, like a film score. It's dramatic and there's horns and it's very over. It's more dramatic and louder. And then in those quieter moments, it is those sort of softer strings and maybe a light little bit of some sort of horn. But it's always in service of whatever is going on screen there. And that's the sign of a great soundtrack is when it not just is, it's not just there, it's part of part of the experience, and adds to the emotions that we're supposed to be feeling, and adds to the excitement of the battle scenes and things like that. And this did a great job of that. And for all those reasons, I actually gave music a very strong 9 out of 10.
Nice. Yeah, I just went a tick lower. I went 8 out of 10. I think even the scene as we kind of go into Kilowog's mind for the first time and see, his sadness about, the loss of his true love here is I thought that was really awesome. I think it just plays sort of the sadness and him being down and him being sort of heartbroken, and then it's punctuated by the Star Sapphire Queen coming in and sort of attempting to seemingly empathize him, but then sending this ring off to in order to potentially bring Kilowog in and capture him. So it's done really, really well. I think that the music plays a large role in this episode. I think I seem to remember us also enjoying it in that first episode that we reviewed as well. So it's strong and it's an important part. No big shock, I guess in a Bruce Timm executive produced episode or TV series. So guess we shouldn't be surprised that they took it pretty serious and allowed it to be such a big player in this series. So all right, Liam, moving on. Let's move into our final category for this week, which of course is going to be our voice acting. Not such a large cast. We have a couple players pulling double duty here with background voices, and actually a couple of our main characters played by the same person. So let's talk about this week's voice cast.
Yeah, we have a lot of characters who we've met before, and not just in this series, but in others as well. But we do have Kevin Michael Richardson as Kilowog, who's, again, he gets to do a little bit more than I think in the first episode, where he's a little bit more gung-ho and and more of a just sort of the classic brawler bruiser type. He's kind of going through quite an emotional roller coaster throughout this episode. So I appreciated seeing him get to flex his acting muscles a little bit.
Yeah, he, as we've mentioned before in his various different voice appearances. Of course, he's done a lot across not only the DCAU, but then of course, the Batman. He's done many cartoons outside of DC Comics. Also, maybe most notably, he's done a lot on Family Guy, and so he's a voice that you recognize, and a lot of times maybe in the minor roles that we've seen him in. Obviously, Static Shock, he plays such a big role in that as well, playing Static's father, and we've gotten to see some emotion come out of him in that, but he didn't get to play a huge role in the more main DCAU shows. So this one, him being a regular on-screen main part of nearly every episode, and again, as you said, being able to evoke some more emotion than just the gung-ho, maybe comedic relief that we saw him in that first episode, or that gung-ho headstrong character. This, as we mentioned, he has a bit of an emotional roller coaster ride for this episode, as he's dealing with a broken heart, and then the hope of being reunited, and then coming to the realization that as Hal breaks him out of the sapphire shell, he's disappointed again. He was so happy, he said, and then coming to the realization that he has to once again leave his true love. So there's certainly a roller coaster of emotion that he has to go on, and it's no shock, I think, that he pretty much delivers.
Kilowog, you seem so bereft.
I'd rather not talk about it.
You suffer from a great loss, a broken heart.
Absolutely. And that'll bring us to some of the rest of our voice cast here. We have Jennifer Hale, who, of course, folks would know as the voice of Giganta and Killer Frost, and many other voices in the DCAU, as well as other cartoons and video games. But she is playing both Giata and Carol Ferris / the Star Sapphire in this episode. So she's got quite the dual role to play here as sort of both of the love interests of Hal Jordan in this episode. But I thought she has some pretty funny lines, and I think the line there where I think it's the act break where she says, I thought you were dead and now you're gonna wish you were. I thought that's a good classic dramatic villain line to go to a commercial on.
Yeah, I agree.
That's right. And then otherwise in the cast, we have Jason Spizak, another veteran voice actor, a lot of video games, playing Razor and voicing both Queen Agapo and Aya. We have Gray Delisle, who I believe goes by Gray Griffin now, but just yet another of this is really kind of a who's who of sort of classic voice actors. As we've talked about, she, of course, you would know her from playing Mandy on The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. She was, of course, Catwoman in the Arkham games, Daphne on Scooby-Doo for many years. So she's another one of those voices that if you've watched any cartoon in about the last 25 to 30 years, you've probably heard her voice quite a few times. So and again, I think she gets to, again, I think show sort of a little bit of her range in that the Aya voice is very sort of simple and doesn't have much emotion to it because she's meant to be an AI, a robot. So she gets to do sort of more of a sort of straight, very cold line readings with there. And then you sort of contrast that with this sort of evil, hyper emotional queen, who's sort of the main villain of the piece. She gets a lot to do here as well.
Yeah, I agree. The Aya character itself, as you mentioned, is intentionally devoid of emotion, and even in this interaction that we have, where we reveal, as we mentioned, this sort of subplot that we assume is setting up something for later on in the show to deal with, that she has lifted, as Aya lifted her visual appearance from Razor's memories and who his true love is, and there's sort of this moment where he comes to realize that his rage sort of starts to come out, and she has to attempt to express sort of sorrow and regret, but it comes off very coldly because, again, she's a robot and she's not supposed to show emotion. So I thought that was done pretty well. It's a line to walk because she is expressing regret or expressing an apology of sorts, but it's also very emotionless in the way that she comes off doing it because she's an artificial intelligence. So it makes sense. The Queen, very sinister. I really enjoy that. She comes off almost immediately. You can tell if she was a classic cartoon villain, even though she's a female, she would probably be twirling a mustache. She's immediately very suspect as to as to her motives for things, and immediately sort of attempting to quell any sort of objections that either Kilowog or Hal or Razor have. She's quick to minimize their concern, and obviously for good reason, as she's attempting to capture them and keep them on their planet for forever. So yeah, it's two different performances. One is sort of over the top and is sort of a straight up evil, not quite evil, but definitely poor motivated character. And then you have one that's just void of emotion, artificial intelligence that still has to express some sort of emotion without actually showing emotion. So I think she does a really fantastic job in balancing both of those and making them unique. Certainly, it's not immediately obvious that it's the same person.
Absolutely, yeah. It really speaks to her range as an actor, and it was cool to see her sort of get to flex those muscles. But then, of course, we have our main actor of the piece. We have Josh Keaton as Hal Jordan / Green Lantern, and not only does would you know him as perhaps most recently playing young little Steve Rogers on the Marvel What If cartoon that's going on Disney Plus, but of course was the voice of Spider-Man on the best Spider-Man cartoon, that being Spectacular Spider-Man, and quite a few other voice acting roles to his name as well. But yeah, I think he fits as a Hal Jordan. I don't really have like an archetypal feel for the Hal Jordan character. Like I feel like he's kind of a doofus in some writers' hands. And he's kind of I know the idea, he's a pilot. He's kind of a hot shot, like, Tom Cruise in Top Gun or something. But I don't really get that feel from this version of Hal Jordan. And maybe that's just because he's, you want him to be a little bit more likable and down to earth since he's the protagonist of the show. But yeah, I think he does a solid job here. A lot of his episode is more just reacting to kind of all the craziness around him, though, in this case.
Yeah, he doesn't come off as the shoot first, ask questions later type, as you mentioned, and I actually like that because being forthright and honest, I think we maybe even touched on this when we reviewed this series back last year. I'm not a Hal Jordan guy. Like, we grew up in a time where Kyle Rayner was our Green Lantern. He was the Green Lantern of the 90s, and then obviously Jeff Johns, when he took over creatively and certainly was responsible for a lot of the larger storylines in main DC continuity in the last decade and a half or so, decided that he was going to revive his childhood heroes, that being Barry Allen and Hal Jordan. It's not a character that I regularly identify with either. I tend to be a creative person myself. I thought that Kyle Rayner had more of an emotional, certainly, and identifiable character traits than just the hothead Air Force pilot that shoots first, again asks questions later. So it's not exactly a relatable character for me. I know that they attempted to sort of modify, and at times I think in various different forms of media, they've tried to make Hal a little bit less emotionally driven that way. Obviously, that played a little bit more part in what his character arc ended up happening in main continuity. So I don't know how it's hard for me to accept a calmer, gentler Hal at times, because knowing in main continuity why that was eventually used as a reason to turn him into a supervillain ultimately. So with that said, how at times is certainly not my favorite Lantern, and certainly I tend to have a prejudice typically against him when it comes to Green Lantern. But This version of Hal Jordan Green Lantern is, for me at least, the least insufferable version of this character, I think, and a lot of that certainly comes from Josh Keaton's performance. I think it's a very calm, even keeled. He comes across as a very smart, even keeled, level headed guy. So I think his performance certainly has something to do with that. And, he's it's a little bit more relatable, I think, than the typical Hal Jordan performance, and completely opposite of what they tried to make Hal Jordan in the live action movie. And what feels like a departure from the character in the comics in the last decade or so. So I think his performance is great, and at least it makes this character somewhat enjoyable for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. Definitely on the same page as far as, Hal's maybe third or fourth on my list of favorite human Green Lanterns. So yeah, it's definitely kind of fun to see him as a protagonist in a role and to actually kind of feel for the character and want to root for him, especially when he has that reunion with Carol. It's really dramatic. And yeah, I think Mr. Keaton's performance is certainly a part of that. But all things together, like I said, I think everyone's really, really solid in this episode. And I gave voice acting another pretty strong 7 out of 10.
Nice. I went just a hair higher. I went 8 out of 10. I think between Josh Keaton and then Jennifer Hale's performances, I think that their interaction also was pretty strong, that they seemed to have real chemistry and pretty believable.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as we said, Kevin Michael Richardson's turn as Kilowog also pretty strong here. So a pretty great rounded out. And even though it's not a huge cast, I feel like everybody did a pretty solid job, and nobody stood out as maybe being over their heads. So great job voice casting here, and great performances all the way around.
Absolutely.
All right, Liam, let's I guess that will bring us to our final scores for this week's episode. So totaling everything up here, I end up with a pretty solid 29 out of 40. What about you?
And I am just 1 point higher at a 30 out of 40 for my final score. So yeah, really a respectable, solid job all around. As we talk about rewatchability, that's a little harder to do with these Elseworlds, as usually we kind of try to put it in context of what it means to the larger universe, and then kind of work backwards from there. But as far as, like I said, what we're looking to do this month is sort of look at alternate takes on villains we've seen before. And obviously Star Sapphire, not a huge character in Justice League, but made a lot of appearances, as you mentioned. And so seeing sort of a combination of a couple different versions. There is the version in the Silver Age comics that has, that it's just sort of this, the spurned lover of Hal Jordan turned into a villain. And then there's sort of combining that with the more recent comic book appearances to make sort of a more sinister version of this core of Star Sapphires. I think that's fun. And I think if you're a fan of their more recent incarnations in the Blackest Night books, and even into the New 52, like New Guardians books and things like that, I think there's some fun stuff here for you if you're a big Lanterns fan.
Yeah, I agree. As we said, it's hard to say whether or not this is. As we said, we know that that the Star Sapphires certainly play a role in this later on, and we know Gietta. I know Gietta makes an appearance later on in this series, so it seems like this is pretty pivotal. It also develops certainly the relationship between Carol and Hal, as this is the first episode that she realizes that he's the Green Lantern. So that seems pretty pivotal, even not knowing how the rest of the series works out. This seems like it's a pretty pivotal episode for that point alone. So I would say it's important, and there's a lot of stuff here that you're going to want to follow up on threads later on, as we mentioned. So I'd say it seems like it's a must watch if you're talking about in the grand scheme of things for this series. As far as if you're just going to pick an episode to watch, yeah, I could say if you said, hey, should I watch this episode? I'd say, sure, give it a shot. It's interesting. There's enough action and enough stuff, as you mentioned, enough homages to some of those sci-fi shows from the 60s and 70s that will probably make you feel a little bit warm and fuzzy if you were able to make those connections like we did. So totally agree. I think this is something that you could recommend. And if you're watching through this series as a whole, seems to be a must watch.
Yeah, agreed. I definitely think there's a lot here, but if you're just a big fan of these characters from the comics, or if you're looking to go through this series, then this is definitely one you got to watch, I think.
There you go. All right, Liam, well, that will begin to wrap things up for this week's episode. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app, Apple, Spotify. You can also check us out on Google Podcasts. You can also check us out on anchor.fm. Don't forget, you can also listen to every episode up on our YouTube page. You can just search the Pod Tower on YouTube. We're members of the Pod Tower YouTube channel there, alongside our friends at Watchtower Database and Tim Talk. You can get content from them as well. If you want to support us, go ahead and subscribe to us on there. We would greatly appreciate that. Also, don't forget, you can support us by leaving a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app, if they so let you. That helps us out. Leave a little blurb too, if you have time, because that helps us out with the algorithm and gets more people listening, which ultimately is what we want. So, Liam, we are again in this Elseworlds Villains Month here at the DCAU Review, meaning that we are going to move forward here with a trip around the multiverse to our next destination. And I know that this one is one that you have to be really, really excited about for next week.
Absolutely. We have talked about quite a few episodes of Batman the Brave and the Bold to date. A lot of fun, wacky ones, and some really fun superhero adventuring. But this one is going to be quite a bit different, and it's sort of one of the, I think, most talked about and maybe remembered episodes of the series because it was such a departure. But for next week's episode, we will be going back to the world of Batman the Brave and the Bold for a look at the episode Chill of the Night.
There we go. I know this is one that ranks pretty highly on a lot of people's lists, and this is one that Mr. James Tucker, who produced that show, has talked about being a very seminal, important episode to him. So look forward to checking that out with you finally for the first time. I know you've seen it before. This will be my first review of this episode, so very excited to check that out with you. But until then, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
We'll talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU.
Bye-bye.